She was burning chaff in 3 big yellow separate heaps as he came across the field. A flame was darting up and along the blue-black edge of each heap like lampwick, leaving smoking ash behind. She stood leaning on the long white handle of a hayfork, arms firm and crooked, hands just below the chin, eyes rather low on the 3 smoking heaps, as if she were not really watching him at all. The wind was cold for October. It blew in sudden ugly gusts, switching smoke over grey-yellow stubble in blue flat clouds that turned back and bit each other like dogs at play. "Could you tell me which is Benacre?" he said. Deliberately, she drew the hayfork down the curve of the nearest heap, dragging chaff into the fire. "You've come the wrong way," she said. "This is the back end of it. It's up the hill." "Which way would that be?" "Up the hill?" she said. She dragged at hot ash and chaff again, stirring them to smoke. This time she darted a quick look at him to see if he had the sense to move away. But he stood in the wind, letting the blue cloud drive full at his face. "You'd better stand over here," she said, "if you don't want to get smoked, right?" In that way, she could see him better. She always looked first at men's hands. She saw that his own were large and long-fingered, but rather white. His hair was smooth and dark and brushed well back. That was the second thing she always looked for. She could not bear men with scruffy, ill-kept hair that sowed seeds all over the shoulders of their jackets. "Could I cut across the field?" he said. "You could," she said, "if you want to land in the river." "Which way did you come?" "I walked from the station." "You should have got the bus and asked," she said. "Then they'd have put you down at Benacre." "I thought I'd like the walk," he said. She plunged the hayfork into the hot ash again as she said, "You'd better stand back if you don't want to get your shoes burnt." That was the next thing she always looked for. Hands and hair and then shoes. Shoes were things that had character. His own were rather like his hair, town shoes, smooth and black and well kept. They were already dusted by a fine powder of chaff ash, and she looked away in irritation. Looking at the fire, she said, "You're looking for Jean Godden, aren't you?" "That's right. I'm her sister," she said. "I'm Doreen." He seemed to look at her for the first time. Her face was flushed under pale blue eyes, with blotches of redness from the bluster of the wind and the heat of the fire. She had a plain white scarf tied tightly back over her head, giving her hair the impression of being whipped severely and sternly back. Her legs were shapeless in short, turned-down gumboots like a fisherwoman's, and in denim trousers the colour of light brown cowhide. "I wouldn't have known it," he said. The wind seemed to blow a shadow of fury across her face. "No, you wouldn't have known it," she thought. "I'm that much older, nearly 40, on the shelf and past it. That's what you were thinking." She stabbed at the fire again. "I thought you were coming last Sunday," she said. "I was," he said. "Then I couldn't get my day off. I had to work the weekend." She waited all day. She didn't know what to do with herself. "I had to work," he said. "There was no way of letting her know." "You couldn't get away with that with some girls," she said. "With me, for instance," she thought. She knows I'm coming today, doesn't she?" he said. "I expect so. She doesn't tell me everything." She looked up at the sky. Clouds were curling up against each other, low and dirty. "The wind's gone up the hill," she said. "It'll rain before you know where you are. You'd better get down to Benacre while it's dry." "Are you going down?" "I shall do, in a bit." "Then I'll wait for you," he said. She swung round and said, "You needn't wait for me. Get on while you've got the chance. I'm used to it. You can cut across to the gate there." "I'd rather wait," he said. "I'm in no hurry." "That's a compliment to somebody," she said. "Weren't you going to stay the night? Where are your things?" "I left my bag over by the gate," he said. "You deserve to get it picked up by somebody then, that's all. There's people going by there all the time. You never know who's about." "There's nothing in it to matter much," he said. "Oh, well," she said, "if that's how you look at it." In a moment she was moving again from fire to fire, raking and stabbing. Then she remembered her sister at home in the kitchen, ironing a brown and yellow dress. The dress was tight in the waist and had one of those wide black cummerbunds that women were wearing now. It was full about the hips, and the ground colour was a warm and lively brown, the colour of autumn leaves, with sprigs of yellow flowers all over it, very delicate and small. It was the sort of dress she could never have chosen for herself. She hadn't the taste of her sister. Things never came off for her. She hadn't the luck either. She hadn't the way of not seeming to want men, the cool, aloof, irresponsible touch. "There's a spit of rain," he said, and she laughed, very short and taunting for the first time. "Huh. You'll look well if she's not there when you get there," she said. "Oh, she'll be there. She said she would." "Oh, will she? And supposing she isn't? You take yourself for granted, don't you? You let her down Sunday." "I didn't let her down." "Well, something like it. It didn't make her feel any sweeter." "What would you do then?" he said. "I'd pitchfork anybody out quick if they let me down." And she made the gesture with her fork above the fire, scattering ash and smoke and chaff. He did not speak, and she turned quickly to see if her taunting had touched him at all. His face was flushed. Wind had disturbed his hair, raking up a few thin, separate strands. His shoes were almost white from dusty ash, and she was suddenly uneasy about the changes in the image of him since he had first walked across the field. For a moment she lost all her hard, high, taunting composure, and she stabbed pointlessly at the fire again and said, "You mustn't mind me. You mustn't take any notice of me. Do you want to go? You do, don't you?" "What about the fire?" he said. "I can wait for you." "Oh, it'll burn itself out. It always does. Or the rain will put it out." Her mackintosh and her tea bag lay behind her. As she turned to pick them up, he moved to help her, but she was there first, grabbing the coat before he could touch it. Then she slung the tea bag over her back and sloped the fork over her shoulder. "Come on, we'd better go," she said. Rain in faster spits came out of the west as the two of them walked across the field. She found herself striding with head down, her big feet flat, her eyes looking at his shoes, ash-covered and now rain-pocked, their neatness gone. "You think she'll be there all right?" he said. "I expect so. If you're fool enough to come, I suppose she'll be fool enough to be there." She could not resist that. And supposing she were not there? She always was. She liked the boys. She had all the luck with them. She was pretty enough with all the taste for anybody. But supposing she were not this time? Rain came swishing faster through the dry golden-brown oaks. What would she do if she were not there? Put on the green dress with the leather belt and the flat shoes and do her hair tightly up in a coconut? "Where's your case?" she said. Behind the hedge," he said. With head down against the rain, he brought back a small, brown weekend case he'd left in the shelter of the hedge by the gate to the field. "Here, you have this Mac," she said. "No," he said. "No, I'm all right." "You've got your best suit on," she said. "You'll get it wet through. You'll ruin it. Come on, you have the Mac on." "No, it's yours, you have it." "I don't want it," she said. "I'm used to it. Come on." "I'm all right," he said. "Are we going to quarrel over a Mac?" she said. "You ruined your shoes already." Queer how the thought of ruined shoes upset her. As he looked down at them, she put the Mac over his shoulders. They were standing in the road now, and suddenly rain came beating down in white sheets on the black metal surface. When he spoke again, his voice was sharp and annoyed. "Now, give me your tea bag and hold the Mac over your head," he said. "Go on. Hold one side while I hold the other. Go on. There's enough room for both of us." She was quiet. She put the Mac over her head and stared down at her big boots slapping in the wet, leaf-printed road, side by side with the neat, half-spoilt shoes she liked so much. She did not know what to say, and she wished suddenly that it was night time, with nobody on the road, so that there was no way of seeing her face. Presently she could bear it no longer, and stopped and swung round to look back across the fields at the fires. The wind was blowing chaff and smoke and dust and flame into the darkening rain from the 3 yellow heaps that were like solitary pyres. "Keep the mac over your head," he said. "What are you looking at now?" "Just the fires," she said. "Oh, come on, they'll burn out. You said they would." "All right, I know." "That's the trouble with some people," he said. "They always know. They always think they know." She did not answer. She walked with head still further down, watching the 2 pairs of feet. The rain beating on her lowered face made her feel dry and tired inside. What did she know? What were the sort of things she was supposed to know? She was a fool, and there was nothing, she thought, that she did know. Nothing but the falling rain, the odor of the mac on her head, the fading smell of fire and smoke on falling leaf, and the chaff driving in the wind.